We're speaking about how the Torah and the mitzvot really serve two different purposes. Although both come to unite us with God, one unites us with God in the world, and one unites us with God within us. The mitzvot that are really performed for the world, to better the world, is what unites us with God in the world. The Torah, which is the nourishment of the soul, as he calls it, which comes to be absorbed by us intellectually and even in our heart and soul, that comes to unite us with God within us, not necessarily within the world. So that's really the big idea. Let's continue where we left off. Where exactly again, Margot? Bottom of 154?
The second paragraph down from 154, whereas the Torah is both food.
Okay, good, yeah. All right, very good. Whereas the Torah is both food as well as a garment. Does anyone want to read?
Sure. I'll read.
Yeah. Go ahead, Margot, please.
Okay.
Go for it.
Whereas the Torah is both food as well as a garment for the rational soul that is enclosed within it during learning and concentration. In contrast, Torah is food for the soul, entering into the being of a person who studies it and becoming part of his inner self. Furthermore, Torah is not only food, but also a garment to the soul. As we explained at length in this chapter, when a person studies Torah, not only does his mind enclose the concept and make it a part of him, but the concept also clothes and encloses his mind. So the Torah also serves the role of garment, becoming the manner of the soul's expression at the time that one is engaged in its study, as is the case with all mitzvot.
Right. Okay, so the Torah is a dual role here. Now, this is kind of new because it has the role of the garment too. We spoke about the first role of the Torah being the role of the food, which nourishes the soul, as we mentioned, but it also has the role of the garment, because when one studies Torah, and what we mean by studying Torah, I think in this case at least, is the study of the Torah that is considered to be the ultimate type of study, and that's when you involve yourself in the study of Torah. The Talmud says that we should memit et atzmo be'olah shel Torah, which means that you should kill yourself in the tent of Torah. What does that mean? The commentaries explain that when you're studying Torah, it's as if everything around you is dead. You've killed all your desires for this world, your worldly desires. You're completely involved in the study of Torah. In fact, we also learn this from a halacha. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, blessed memory, his yahrzeit is today, learns this actually from a halacha, because there's a halacha in the laws of Purim. I don't want to deviate too much, but I think this is the study of the Torah that Tanya is referring to. So I'll mention it. But there's a halacha, a law in the laws of Purim, that one is allowed to stop learning Torah, mafsik. The word is mafsik, to stop learning Torah in order to go and listen to the Megillah, to the story of Purim, which is one of the 4 mitzvot of the festival of Purim. Mafsikim Torah lishma Megillah. And one is allowed to stop the study of Torah in order to listen to the Megillah. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe would ask, 1 second, the Megillah is a part of Torah. You're not stopping the studying of Torah to listen to the Megillah. You're continuing the study of Torah to listen to the Megillah. Megillah is the Megillah of Esther is part of the Torah. So why does it use the word mafsik? And the answer is because when we listen to the Megillah, when we just listen to something, we're not completely absorbing that something. On the other hand, when we're studying something and being active learners, that's when we're studying. So mafsikim Torah lishma Megillah, when the halakha tells us to stop learning Torah, it is because it assumes that we are learning Torah in a way that is so immersive that the listening of the Megillah won't be as equal in our effort and in our immersion to the study of the Torah that we came from, and therefore it's considered a type of stopping your studying Torah. So, but all this, what this refers to is that the study of Torah is really to involve ourselves in Torah, to be completely immersed in the study of Torah. When we relate to Torah like that, then it becomes both food and a garment. By the way, the blessing that we say on the study of Torah in the Ashkenazic version, not in the Sephardic version, is la'asok b'divrei Torah. It's in the morning blessings. Each and every morning, right, we say the Birkot HaShachar. One of the morning blessings is on the study of Torah. Sephardic Jews say al divrei Torah, but Ashkenazic Jews go further and they say la asok b'divrei Torah, which means to involve ourselves in the study of Torah. Again, referring to this complete immersion in the study of Torah. So when we study Torah like that, the Torah then becomes both the food, it nourishes the soul, certainly. It's the best exercise for the soul you can ever give it. But at the same time, also it becomes a garment, because the Torah then becomes a part of you. When I immerse myself in my job becomes a part of me. When I immerse myself in my family becomes a part of me. When I immerse myself in the study of Torah, the Torah becomes a part of me. And it's like a garment that I'm wearing. It's one of my hats, or maybe the hat that I'm wearing. And furthermore, it also has this impact. The study of Torah has the ability to truly transform a person, not just within, but also without, like a garment that transforms a person. And that transformation is a transformation that, of course, elevates the person, but also that radiates towards the outside. And that certainly has an impact, maybe even a subconscious impact on our surroundings. So the Torah then, when related to with immersion, right, then it becomes food and garment. Yes, Rabbi Eisen, please.
This puts an interesting spin on a phrase from Pirkei Avot.
Yes.
Kemach in Torah, main Torah in Kemach, which is usually, at least my understanding, was that without food, there's no Torah. Without Torah, there's no food. Talks about that there has to be a balance between what we're doing in life and studying Torah. So you have to have both. But if you take this, it really changes the whole nature of the phrase. That if it is not nourishment, then it's not Torah. Because if we don't use it as this food, it's not Torah. And if it's Torah, then it has to be that nourishment.
Right.
So it changes the whole nature of that phrase and takes it to a different level.
Right. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And I would add to this also that, it's interesting because the study of Torah is a mitzvah. It's one of the 613 commandments. But it's the only mitzvah, maybe one of the only mitzvahs. Prayer is another one maybe. But one of the only mitzvahs that can only be done if you are really immersed in it. If I'm not immersed in the mitzvah of charity and I give that dollar to the poor man, whether I have good intentions or not, that mitzvah is being fulfilled because the person is going to be able, as we've mentioned, is going to be able to provide for his family. So the mitzvah is a mitzvah. But the study of the Torah, really, you can't really study Torah if you're not immersed, if you don't have that ability to dive into it. You can say words, but then you're not studying. You're not studying. You're not fulfilling the mitzvah. So it really needs to be that kemach, that nourishment, for the study to be, for the mitzvah of studying Torah, to be a mitzvah, studying Torah. Yes, Ronnie.
So what does studying Torah involve? What is studying Torah?
That's a great question. So
why would I ask otherwise?
So first of all, what we're doing right now is studying Torah. Studying Torah is basically studying the Word of God, whether it's the actual Word of God in the Torah, or whether it's the interpretation of the Word of God by the Talmud or by Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi in the Tanya. That's on the surface. That's the simple answer to that. On a deeper level, studying the Torah is putting our mind aside or our own personal thoughts aside, maybe our ego aside, and striving, like we said last week, to understand who God is, or to know God, right? I know there was a confusion between the word understanding and knowing, but saying, God, I want to know you. I'm putting every preconception that I have aside. I want to know you. And that's the study of Torah. Now, there is no real part of the Torah that is considered to be the part that everyone should be studying. The Torah is infinite as the seas, as the psalmist puts it, minei yam. So the Talmud therefore states, Lo lilmad adam ela b'makom shelibo chafetz, that a person should only study in a place, not just in the physical place, but in the Torah place, where his heart desires. If you feel like you want to study the mitzvah of tefillin, I guess that's part of your soul's calling. So go and study the mitzvah of tefillin. If I feel like I want to study the story of Abraham, so I'll go and study the story of Abraham. Now, it doesn't mean that I should only study that. that will lead me to another part of the Torah and another part of the Torah, but it's infinite. So really a person should study that where his heart leads him. That's to add to that. One last thing, and that is that the study of Torah also needs to, as it says, there's again, the Mishnah says that person who says to himself, I only have Torah study, that's my only mitzvah, then even Torah study doesn't have. What does that mean? Because the Torah study really needs to impact the person so much that it influences him to act, propels him to action. The study of Torah remains just on the intellectual level, then yes, you've performed the mitzvah, but you've missed the point. Then really you don't really have Torah, because the whole purpose of Torah is for you to translate what you are studying into action. So when one comes to study the Torah, you should come with the mindset that whatever he's studying is dangerous. Dangerous, because it's going to ask you to do certain things, and you have to be open to doing those things. It's almost like the Baal Shem Tov would say that the study of the Torah really should create such a change in a person that he's not the same person. The person that came to study the Torah is not the same person as the person that came out of the study of the Torah. You know, I don't know if I shared the story, but we're studying Tanya, and one of the stories about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rav Shnessen, again, of blessed memory, whose yahrzeit is today, is that there was a Hasidic Jew, Zalman Gurari, who was well known. He was a very successful businessman too, and he once went to a business trip from New York, had a flight from JFK, and he, I think, needed a flight to Detroit. Anyway, he comes to the airport that evening, says goodbye to his family, goes to the airport, and in the airport they tell him, sorry, your flight has been canceled. Your next flight will be tomorrow night. Now, Rabbi Zalman Gurari wants to go back home because he doesn't have a flight for 24 hours. He wants to go home to sleep at home, but he remembers that there's what's called Tzavaat Yehuda Chassid, the testament of Yehuda Chassid of some 1,000 years ago. And he has all sorts of requests from people. For example, that one should not get a haircut on Rosh Chodesh. But one of the requests is that one shouldn't say goodbye to his family twice. It's just bad omen. So he remembers this and he says, well, I can't go back home. I already said goodbye to my family. But I want to go back home because my next flight is in 24 hours. What am I going to do? Go to a hotel? So he doesn't know what to do. And he calls the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the secretary takes his question and he calls him back after a few minutes. And he says, the Rebbe says that you should learn a chapter of Tanya, which is what we're doing right now. And then you can go back home. Because the Zalman Gurari that left the home before learning this chapter of the Tanya is a different Zalman Gurari coming back to the home after learning a chapter of Tanya. They won't be the same man returning home, so you'll be okay. But
that's a great story.
That's the power really of the study of Torah that we're speaking about here, and especially a study that propels us to action. Yeah.
So the study of Torah always changes you a little bit.
That's right. That's right, and that's why, you know, the statement we've quoted from the Talmud is very strong. Le'olam yilmad adam. Person should forever, always study Torah with good intentions or with bad intentions. It doesn't matter, because shemitoch shelo lishma ba lishma, because that study of Torah will eventually lead him to transformation. Well, he'll connect to God in an earnest way. So the study of Torah certainly does wonders. Part of the reason is because of what we've mentioned also in the past, because the study of the Torah is unlike any other study. It's not like studying science or studying history. And not just because these are things that are, you know, maybe more earthly, even though the study of science and study of history can certainly reveal God's power in many ways, but still, they still relate to the realm of this world. And the study of Torah relates to the metaphysical, right? But not only that, but that's because the study of the Torah is something that is already part of our DNA. It's ingrained in us. And, you know, there's this whole new school of thought now in science called epigenetics, where you inherit, you know, all the traumas of your parents and your grandparents and so on. It's not just the traumas you inherit. It's also the spiritual forces that you inherit. I mean, if it's true, if what epigenetics teaches is true, then you inherit everything. Why just the trauma? Everything. So by studying Torah on a scientific level, right? Epigenetics, on a scientific level, you're actually studying something that was a part of your ancestry already, something that already exists. And if we want to go all the way to our source, to the source of that study, we go to Mount Sinai. So we're studying something that's already in our DNA, which is, think about it, scientifically, it's astounding. But moreover, not just scientifically, but spiritually speaking, the Talmud states that we studied Torah with an angel in the wombs of our mothers. We mentioned this Talmudic statement too in the past. And the entire Torah was studied by us, thanks to this angel. And when we come out, we forget it all. The angel slaps us and we forget it all. But the point of this is that because when we study Torah, it's almost like a song that we know that comes back to us slowly but surely. So it's studying something that we already know, just a song that has been forgotten. And that's what the study of the Torah really provokes.
So maybe a question before, what is a study of Torah?
Yeah.
How does one prepare themselves before they study Torah?
That's a great question, because you actually have in the code of Jewish law, you actually have halachot, laws that pertain to that. That what you come to the study of the Torah with bekoved rosh, as it says, which is translated maybe as with seriousness. I don't know, Rabbi Eisen, do you have a better translation for that? Bekoved rosh. With seriousness, with understanding the seriousness of the moment. Now, therefore, there are halachic implications. You can't come straight from the gym to study Torah. Take a deep breath, maybe shower a little bit, and then study. So you have actual pragmatic ways of how to prepare. But the idea is that we have to recognize that we're about to now interact with God himself. So just as you wouldn't go to the boardroom of a CEO, if that's in your company, to have a meeting with the CEO without first organizing your thoughts and really preparing for it, so too you wouldn't go to the CEO of the world and of the universe without really having that bekoved rosh, that seriousness. So that's the general spirit behind those laws.
Rabbi, the angel didn't slap. The angel just touched under the nose.
That's what they say. So people who don't have this, that's it. They have the whole Torah. They remembered everything.
Yeah, it all.
Right.
You know what I always have trouble understanding
Yes.
is how people who study Torah
Yes.
end up doing such bad things. I'm not saying, oh,
No,
you
no. I
know,
understand.
it's like an example is the founder of Hatzalah in Israel.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with that story.
Yeah, of Zaka, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Zaka, yeah.
Who abused hundreds of children,
Yeah.
girls and boys.
Yeah.
And the Hasidic community cover up what he's done.
Right.
In the name that he's a rabbi, he's a Torah scholar.
Yeah, let's not generalize.
I don't understand how people could study Torah, have these garments, and then do such things. I have trouble with that.
I look, absolutely. I know the story you're referring to. It's horrific, horrendous. The guy tried to commit suicide and couldn't even stand justice, but coward. But there's multiple answers to that. First of all, imagine how much worse they would be without the study of Torah. That's one answer. Another answer is that the study of Torah might really give you that garment and that food, but it doesn't give you immunity to any evil inclination, to any type of evil inclination. Judaism in general doesn't immune you to anything.
No, but it's supposed to transform you and elevate you, right? We just talked about that.
Right. They're supposed to. And they're supposed to also give you the tools. But, you can, how does the expression go? You can bring a horse to the water, but you can't make it drink, right? How does that expression go? So it gives you the tools, no doubt. And it certainly brings you to the water. But at the end of the day, you have to be the master of yourself. That's the main theme of the Tanya. You have to recognize that you have an animal soul, and you have to control that animal soul, regardless of how much Shas you know, how much Talmudic tractates you know. Yeah, at the end of the day, so the Torah will give you those tools, but at the end of the day, you have to exercise them. And then third, and then Rabbi Eisen, I want to hear your take too. Third, I will say this: I doubt, and I'm not yet a judge. God forbid, I never try to never judge people, but I doubt that they actually study Torah. These people. If we're speaking about studying Torah as an immersion, I don't think, the ethics of our fathers already warns us that God forbid someone uses Torah, the study of Torah, as kardom lachporba. In other words, as in the most selfish way, as in a way that you use the study of Torah for your own personal gain. And I think that's the way they approach Torah. Now, I'm not yet a judge, and I don't know, but I don't think they really ever study Torah, these people. But Rabbi Eisen, please.
I think that comment goes right back to Rabbi Kaufman's question of how do you prepare?
Right.
To paraphrase, it says, those who want to learn in order to teach will learn in order to teach. Those who want to learn in order to do will learn in order to teach and to do. So it depends on how we're approaching it too. And we can learn and have the facade of being very wise, but we may know some things, but are we really applying them? Have they become food for the soul, so to speak, that garment? Or are we just regurgitating things that have come into our belly? So it's a lousy analogy, but it's just how serious are we taking it? Do we see it as Torah or just a body of knowledge that will impart? It's a paycheck, it's a comfortable existence, but it's not internalized and part of us. And I think Ronnie's question is really important. That how do we approach this? Mm-hmm. Is it in order to change our world, change ourselves, or is it just this is what we do?
Right.
I have a question on that.
Yes,
what happens as listeners, as we're studying the Torah or we're listening to what you're all saying? How do we know what, is there some preparation there also as you decide what you want to listen to and what you don't agree with, or,
Right. Well, you're active listeners. There's passive listeners and there's active listeners. Active listener is study, in my eyes at least. And I think it's the general spirit that we were speaking about, the Koved Rosh. You have to take it seriously. You have to take the study seriously because you have to recognize that this is coming from God. And you have to take it seriously because you have to recognize words that are coming from God have to be internalized. But
then you have to trust the person that you're listening to.
That's also true. That's true. That's true. The conveyors of the Torah. Now I'm going to disappoint you because I certainly don't resemble that. Rabbi Eisen does. Maybe that's why you should be teaching more than me. But that's why the Talmud says. That's why the Talmud says that a person should only study Torah from a person who looks like Malach Hashem Tzevakot. That's what the Talmud says, which means the person that resembles an angel of God. If your teacher resembles an angel of God, kabel Torah mipiu, then receive Torah from his mouth. If not, don't receive Torah from his mouth. So Rabbi Isaac should be teaching much more.
It's young angels and older angels.
That's it. Yeah. But I'll tell you this, I'm reminded of Rabbi Steinsaltz, who was on the directorship of the Jerusalem Zoo for many years, and he loved animals. He always used to say that he loves creatures that walk on 4 legs. Those on 2, maybe sometimes yes. But the animal that he despised the most, I know which ones he loved the most. The cheetah he loved, for example, but the animal that he despised the most was the peacock. And he said that's because once in the Jerusalem Zoo, they had to unpluck all of the feathers of a peacock for some reason. And he realized that when all of these beautiful feathers are unplucked, the peacock looks simply like an ugly chicken. And then he would always used to say, I know some people like that. They have all sorts of feathers, and they use Torah as one of those feathers, or as many of those feathers. but they just use them to for their own personal gain, for their arrogance. When you unplug it, you see that they're inside, they really never internalized anything. They're ugly chicken. Anyway, so that's an analogy of Rabbi Steinsaltz. Ronnie, please.
And a follow-up question, what is the objective, no, what is the ultimate objective of study of Torah? The ultimate objective, what is it? Where are we going? Where are we going to get to?
To
You have good questions today, Ronnie.
You mean last week I didn't have good questions?
No, I'm sorry. You always have good questions, but
You weren't here last week.
that's the best question of today. That's the best question. You mean last week?
Thank you.
Today you have like,
Because I come to this class seriously.
no,
I
no,
take it
and
very seriously.
absolutely. And it's a good question because when we study Torah, when we come to study Torah together, then it's questions that should really reverberate in our mind. How should we prepare? And what is the ultimate goal of us coming to study Torah? I would say the ultimate goal of us studying Torah, if I had to condense it into really one thought, and that is to remind us that we are souls with a divine calling and not bodies with an earthly calling. When we study Torah, it should trigger our soul. And it should trigger the connection we have with God and that accountability we have towards God. Yes, Ronnie.
I would add on to that for me, the ultimate objective is oneness with God, and as with oneness with God, we become oneness with each other, and we become a community that works together.
Beautiful, yeah. I think that's part of that divine calling, that when we realize that we are souls, and like the Tanya says in chapter 32, that we realize that Av Echad Lekulana, there's one Father to everyone. It's like the Lubavitcher Rebbe wrote about this on Friday, but the Lubavitcher Rebbe told David Dinkins, who was the mayor of New York City during the Crown Heights riots, that there are two sides to this conflict, but there is one side. After all, we're all children of God. There's one side, there aren't two sides. And that certainly is one of the thoughts that the Torah, not just the thoughts, one of the ideas that need to be actualized that the Torah study evokes. Certainly, right.
And what would that be? What does a Torah study provoke?
Again, that I think it should come to remind us that we are souls with a divine calling, united with God, and not bodies that are divided and are filled with earthly desires. Yeah. I'd love to hear your take. It's a great question. I want to hear other takes on this. Rabbi Eisen, maybe you can enlighten us too.
I would go back to your statement about Lishma, that sometimes the ultimate goal is just to do it, and to stay engaged.
Right. Yeah. Oh, well said. Yeah. I will share a story, and maybe that answers this question too. But in honor of Cain, Lubavitcher Rebbe, his Yortzeit is today. This is it's a very serious day, I think, for the Jewish people, but for myself personally, I had the great merit of meeting the Lubavitcher Rebbe 3 times, and my interactions with the Rebbe will never be forgotten. But I also stand here as a small miracle of the Rebbe. My childhood was replete with diseases, and specifically a genetic disease, and my parents did not know what to do, and I really suffered a lot, and the Rebbe really gave me a blessing and changed my fate, I believe, my medical fate. But so they say in Hasidic thought that love, what is the definition of love? Love is awakening the song in the other that he may have forgotten. That's what love is in Hasidic thought. Everyone is implanted with a song that he or she needs to sing throughout his lifetime, a unique song. And when a person forgot that song, then love comes to awaken that song so that the person can sing it again. There's a beautiful story about the Lubavitcher Rebbe who had a Chassid student by the name of Rabbi Yaakov Taibel, I think. Yaakov Taibel. No, not Yaakov. Zalman Taibel. Zalman Taibel was a Hasidic Jew who suffered a lot in Russia. He was in the Gulag and so on. And he was also a musical composer. And he composed one of the classic Chabad Hasidic tunes, nigunim, called Ana Avda de Kucha Brichu. It comes from the prayer of Berich Shemei that we say during the opening of the Ark. And basically it states in Aramaic, I am God. God, I am your devoted servant. I trust you alone. You are my everything. Ana Avda de Kucha Brichu. And he composed this beautiful tune to these words. And it became part and parcel of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's prayers. Rabbi Zalman Taibel, towards the end of his life, suffered from Alzheimer. And he became a skeleton of his old self. And one day someone said, you know what, let's go back to the Rebbe. Maybe something will awaken in him. And he comes to the Rebbe and he's completely, you can tell, I mean, he's completely disconnected. He's Alzheimer. And he doesn't even know where he is. And he comes to the Rebbe and the Rebbe looks at him. It was just before, I think, Rosh Hashanah, where the Rebbe would give out honey cake and, or Yom Kippur, one of those. When do you give out honey cake? Whatever. Rosh Hashanah, thank you. So the Rebbe sees Rabbi Zalman Taibel and you can see it's on video, you can see he's disoriented. The Rebbe tries to speak to him again, completely disoriented. And then the Rebbe, there's a huge line, stops the line and he starts to sing to Zalman Taibel. It's the most moving moment. That's that specific song that he had composed. Na na avido, and sings the whole song. The Rebbe had a beautiful voice. And all of a sudden, you see Rabbi Zalman Taibel coming back to life. There's a huge smile that fills his face, and Zalman Taibel even sings along. And that was a moment. And it, stands frozen in time, as they say. But that's really what the Rebbe did throughout his lifetime. He awoke the songs within people that they may have forgotten, especially the soulful songs of people. And in a way, going back to your question, Ronnie, I think that's what Torah study needs to achieve. That it awakens that song that we may have forgotten, to make us sing it again. And it's a soulful song. It's a song that only wants to do good and really only wants to be as soulful as it gets, selfless also as it gets, as divine as it gets, as holy as it gets. But I'm thinking of that story because that's the purpose of Torah study also. So we had the Rebbe who did that for countless people, and in a way continues with his influence to do that to countless people. And that's what Torah study also should be doing to us.
Before we go, I'll leave you a thought for maybe next time we meet, you can answer. So now that we have the ultimate objective and we're all doing it, what is the outcome of it?
What is the outcome of, I don't quite understand the question. The outcome of Torah study, you mean?
The outcome of having the ultimate objective. We've met it, which means we are studying together. What is the outcome? What does that mean? What does that mean for?
Right. So I'm going to answer that on one foot because really we have to go, but that's another story about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And I'm going to mention him again in his honor and in honor of his Yortzeit today. But I know a rabbi, I know him personally, Rabbi David Lapin in South Africa. You may know his brother, Daniel Lapin, who's here in Seattle. But David Lapin is a chemist. And at the same time, while he was working in chemistry, he was also giving classes. And he came to the Rebbe once and he said to him, look, it's too much on my plate. I don't know what to do. I feel like I need to cancel the classes and focus truly entirely on chemistry, or maybe just focus on my teaching and then forget chemistry. And the Rebbe encouraged him to continue with both. And he said to the Rebbe, that's impossible. Too much on my plate. And the Rebbe said, you see, I'll tell you where your mistake lies. You think, like in chemistry, that when two people interact with each other, it's like two chemicals interacting with each other. You have two chemicals interacting with each other, and it has some impact. It creates a third consequence. But when two people interact each other, it's like two nuclear atoms interacting with each other. And with that interaction is indeed soul to soul, it creates this nuclear reaction that doesn't just impact the third person, but it impacts countless more. You never know the impact this could have. So you may say, well, I want to give up my classes because I'm only interacting, say, with 20 people or whatever it is. And you only have 20 people, maximum 40 people there, because they'll carry the word to a third person. But really, it's a nuclear reaction. The ripple effect that this has is much beyond that which your naked eye can see. I think the outcome of us coming together to study Torah is really a nuclear reaction. Who knows? It certainly speak on behalf of myself. It certainly elevates me. And that gives me the strength to do so much more in a nuclear way. And I hope it does the same to you too.
Yeah.